but I just wanted to welcome everybody. Good morning, LIASA colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, great. Everybody can hear me. My name is Leanne Brown, and I'm the current chair of the RETIG interest group. And for those of you, just to clarify, RETIG stands for Research, Education and Training Interest Group. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar today. And I thank you all for your attendance. It is so great to see so many of you joining us. And I hope that you're all well and safe during these uncertain times that we're facing. The theme of our webinar today is opportunities and threats for LIS education, research and training in light of COVID-19. As librarians, our work has been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which makes this topic very appropriate. Today, we've got two very interesting speakers who will be discussing this topic. So I'm going to introduce them now. Our first speaker is Dr. Collence Chisita, who is a postdoctoral fellow at UNISA in the Department of Information Sciences. He specializes in lecturing and researching on various subjects, ranging from the use of ICTs in information management, information retrieval, research, knowledge management, information consultancy, information retrieval, among other topics. He has a keen and wider interest in the modern technologies of the knowledge age. Chisita is a holder of a PhD in information sciences from the University of Pretoria, and he has published a number of journal articles, book chapters, and books on information science. He is a member of ZIMLA, LIASA, KILIP, IFLA, and Zimbabwe Library Association. He has been a guest speaker for the Library and Information Association of Zambia in 2019. Our second speaker is Ms. Andiswa Mfengu, who is a lecturer at the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship at the University of Cape Town. She is an emerging active scholar. She is also the vice chair of the African Library and Information Associations and Institutions, known as AFLIA, in the Library Education and Training Institutions section. She is also a chapter assembly representative for the Association for Information Science and Technology, Africa chapter. She was nominated by UCT's Vice Chancellor to apply for the prestigious NRF-funded Black Academics Advancement Program. So I think that our two speakers today are going to really give us some interesting information and share their wisdom and insights. I just want to check if our first speaker, Dr. Collence Chisita, is online, is connected now. If he is, can he please just raise his hand? Otherwise, I'm going to hand over to our second speaker. Collins might be having issues connecting, so I'm going to then ask Andiswa to start. And just before she starts her presentation, we're going to take the questions and the comments after both speakers have presented. So please, if you have any comments, put it in the chat box, And then after both speakers, you can just raise your hand if you want to talk and ask a question or make a comment. So I'm going to hand over now to Andiswa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. I will just start to share my slides. Leanne, does everything look fine? Can I get started? I've shared my slides.
Yes, I can see it. You can get started. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Thank you for this opportunity from RETIG and Leanne and the committee, as well as from LIASA. It's really a privilege to be able to share my viewpoints and insight in terms of the impact of COVID-19 and the national lockdown on LIS education and training. And my focus will be more on the education and training, as you can see on my slides. And as Leanne mentioned, I am Andiswa Mfengu. I am from the University of Cape Town in the Department of Knowledge and Information Stewardship, which is in the Faculty of Humanities. So of course, COVID-19 has affected not only our lives and how we do things, but it has also affected LIS education and as well as training. The COVID-19 pandemic, it has changed teaching and learning in higher education, and it has also affected our discipline. Overnight, universities around the world had to migrate from face-to-face engagements to emergency remote teaching, as well as emergency remote as well as emergency distance learning for our students. And of course, emergency remote teaching, which is referred to as ERT, is different from online teaching, which is what a number of universities do, and distance education like the University of South Africa. So emergency remote teaching is different in the sense that it consists of a well-planned online learning experiences. So if one hence, we have adopted to call it emergency remote teaching at the University of Cape Town, but I think also higher education in general, we refer to it as emergency remote teaching because it is different from online teaching, which consists of well-planned online learning experiences, which are meaningfully different from courses being offered online in response to a crisis or a disaster, which is what ERT is. And of course, in online teaching, the experiences are planned from the beginning and they are designed to be online. While with emergency remote teaching, ERT, it is a temporary shift of instruction delivery to an alternative delivery mode due to a crisis. So we are shifting how we used to deliver our physical face-to-face classes to an online mode in response to a pandemic. And of course, then ERT involves the use of fully remote teaching solutions for instruction or education that would otherwise be delivered face-to-face or in a blended or a hybrid manner. And of course, the idea is that once the pandemic or the crisis is over, what was moved then into an emergency remote teaching would then revert back to the face-to-face once the crisis is over. Hence, we refer to it as emergency remote teaching. And of course, then that also our students, we refer to it not to online learning rather than emergency distance learning. And of course, then the primary objective in these circumstances when we moving our courses from face-to-face to an online space, it is not to recreate a robust or an educational ecosystem, but rather to provide temporary access to instruction and also instructional support in a manner that is quick to set up and reliable during an emergency or crisis. While of course then another one we look at is a blended learning or blended teaching, which combines online educational materials and opportunities for interaction online with a traditional face-to-face classroom methods. And of course, for our department at the University of Cape Town, we do a postgraduate, we're a postgraduate only department, and we have courses at our master's level where we actually already have adopted blended learning. However, with our postgraduate diploma, it was fully face-to-face, and of course, then this had to move then to the emergency remote teaching. And of course, then We are aware of the circumstances in our country, not only that affect our students, but also in the continent and internationally. We are aware of the unequal socioeconomic conditions, that as we move to the emergency remote teaching, that our students have different conditions, and of course they had to be moved away from campus to home. And of course, we know home environments, they're different. Of course, you can see some environments, they're not as conducive for learning. And of course, we have been quite fortunate at the University of Cape Town that we managed to resume with emergency remote teaching already in April, because the university, we're quite privileged that the university could provide laptops to students that did not have, and it managed to provide data to students, and students were given daytime data of 10 gigs. And also we had a number of university sites that students didn't, actually were zero rated. So students did not have to pay anything to access those sites. So they could use their 10 gig for other things, for their research, but one could access the learning management system, which we use, Vula, without any cost. However, we are aware that this has not been the case for other institutions in the country and also throughout the continent. So as I share in my slides, a lot of it I'll touch on what we've done at UCT, and of course I'm aware of the broader higher education context, that this might not be the case for other institutions. And of course, also our higher education context is was not only affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and moving our courses online or remotely, and our students having to study in different environments, which was different from being in the library and on campus, as well as also in the residences. And we are aware that we live in a society that, as I mentioned, also the socioeconomic conditions that we experience in the country, but also we have other social issues that have also added on top of the COVID-19, such as Black Lives Matter, which we've seen not only in South Africa, but also globally as a trend against police brutality. And of course, this also is something that we, as the higher education context, that we cannot ignore. It is part of our context, it is part of our landscape. And also decolonizing our curriculum and our practices. This is also not a new thing, but it is a continuing project of the higher education, of higher education. And also we've got gender-based violence. And of course, also it is not a new thing, but of course, as we continue with our teaching and learning, as we continue with our training, these are the social issues that are there now in our environment, and we have to recognize them and be cognizant of them as we teach, and also as and understanding the new realities that we are facing. Of course, if we had a way in class, we would have a conversation with our students and understand the different challenges. But now with students start learning from different environments, so these are some of the challenges we have to be cognizant of in our broader higher education context. So of course, with other, I just mentioned a number of our new realities in the country, so there's different socioeconomic conditions. However, also we've been aware of these conditions, and also the massive increase in terms of unemployment and also underemployment, which is the reality that our students find themselves in, and also us as the academics. And of course, also, and as I'll touch later on some of the experiences that the students shared in terms of the survey that the university has done, which also looks at trends are not just at UCT, but and also not only our discipline, but also the higher education and also internationally. However, with the move to online, there has been undoubtedly benefits with the new forms of pedagogy, and also it helped to save the academic year, us moving to emergency remote teaching. And of course, moving instruction online, this has also provided us some flexibility in terms of teaching and learning. And of course, our students also, and also we were able to teach from anywhere and at any time, because things are recorded and students can actually access these in wherever they might be. Of course, at times one might have classes where it's recorded, but it's a live class. So there has been great opportunities also we kind of need to reflect on in terms of this period for the past 6 months or so. And of course, one has been also innovative thinking in the delivery of teaching and training, not only at UCT, we've seen across the country and also in the continent and broadly, the move from Zoom and Teams and the use of WhatsApp to engage with students, and also some of asynchronous methods. I mean, I've explored myself with slide recording. So narrating slides in the past, that's not something we did because we had face-to-face classes. And also we as teachers, I think also with our students, we had to upskill and reskill with the different tools we were exploring and also different ways of doing things. So we've adopted more tools indeed. And of course, we had support in terms of you moving courses online, with many departments on campus supporting the academic staff with that. And I think also, I mean, we've been more adaptable and flexibility in how we do things, and also resilience. I think this is not only do we see that in the academic space, but also I've seen with librarians across the country and internationally how they've actually quickly moved things online and to support the academic project. And of course, the pandemic has called on all of us to be resilient and open to teaching, working, and living in different and new ways. And also, we've been kind of taught to be more sensitive to the many changes, to the many things, as I mentioned also, that students have to learn, but also we've got also the social issues that are available or are there in our environment. And also we've learned to be compassionate. And there's been a call from vice chancellors, not only in South Africa but internationally, for educators to be compassionate, and being compassionate, but also not compromising the teaching quality. And also we've found many ways to actually collaborate with colleagues within UCT, within LIS sister institutions, so across the country as well as abroad, in terms of our teaching and also working together in projects, because now we actually do not have any limitations of space or location, because we've kind of moved everything online. But also this has given us an opportunity to reimagine higher education, looking at options, what can be done online, what can be done physically. So looking at blended learning, hopefully for 2021 and moving forward, a lot of institutions, and of course LIS also has been looking at options for reimagining higher education. So in terms of blended learning, and also this would afford us a greater reach beyond one's region, continent, and also country. And of course, even though we've had lots of benefits, we need to be cognizant in terms of our challenge, of the many challenges that are brought forward by the pandemic. As we reflect back on what has worked, we kind of need to be cognizant of the realities and the context we find ourselves in South Africa, and I think a lot of it also in the global South. And of course, UCT then did a student survey on the experiences of the students during this emergency remote teaching. So I will actually just present a summary of what were of the responses from the survey. And of course, this is not only unique to UCT, but we've seen the trends also in the country and also internationally from what came out from this survey. And of course, our department, we fall under the humanities faculty, and of course the response rate across was more around 17%, so the 3.8 for the whole university. And of course we can see it breaks it down also by the level of study and also which students were in residence and not. And also it touches on the academic year right on my right, and also the program. As you know, in undergraduate programs, some they are extended, so a 4-year programs. So of course, this also gave us a good insight for our own department and also for our programs as we plan ahead, and also what were the experiences with our students. But of course, what was something to note in some of the limitations with the survey. Of course, the response rate was only 3.8 students across the institution managed to answer. And of course, then of students that don't have access, they would not be able to share their experiences because they're either in the rural areas or in the remote areas. There's issues with connection. So of course, there are those limitations that some students do not get the opportunity to participate. But still, this gives us a great insight moving forward, and also as we look at the ERT and also consider a blended learning for 2021. So of course, the first one that there's a number of them, but I'm going to just touch on a few areas that I think are important for us, also for LIS. And while one was the course load. So a lot of students, so you can see in those graphs, so this refers to the course load. So it asked these two different questions. And of course, the green refers to strongly agree or agree. And of course, the red is a disagree or somewhat disagree. And most of the students, they felt that there was too much content for the available time. And of course, while with the emergency remote teaching, the target was 30 nominal hours workload per week, which of course is a reduced load compared to before, where students were expected to work 40 hours and more. And of course, many students then did, actually, you can see from then, we fall under the humanities faculty for our discipline at UCT. And we can see a lot of students, they did feel like there was too much course content for the time that was allocated. And of course, we know the time was already reduced, and we know with moving courses online, one had to reduce the load that was that our students had. And of course, we can see also, so the students did agree that they actually found the course load. A majority did not find the course load manageable because, of course, as much as it's reduced, students have different home conditions. So some have to look after their loved ones. They had chores and different things, which are when the students are in residences, this is not the case. So this is just some of the trends and some of the experiences that our students had during this time. And of course, this gives us great insight and reflection that as we plan for 2021, as we are aware that the virus is still going to be around, this actually informs our planning and yes, our planning moving forward. And I think this is not just unique to UCT, but also to the LIS discipline and even across the continent. So so another one they actually asked about was the home and study circumstances, and a lot of students they found that in term 2 that their living conditions were actually suitable for online learning, a majority of them that answered. And also then in terms of a time, we can see that actually more than 50% they did not necessarily feel like they had sufficient time for remote learning. And in terms of data, so the students are given 10 gig daytime data, and a good number felt like they had enough data for that first term. But of course, we know now that they know this is even the 10 gig across a lot of students found that that was not actually enough, because with the home conditions at times one student might have 10 gig, but you've got siblings and they would actually connect and use the data with siblings or other needs that might be there in a household, which of course that is the reality. If a mother has lost a job and one child has 10 gig, of course, if other siblings don't have, that would be shared across with other institutions that might not have given data, or actually even with high scholars which did not get data, but we're doing some level of online schooling. And of course, with some of the challenges that students face remotely, one of the greatest challenges our students faced was, of course, mental health challenges. So they experienced some anxiety, stress, and depression during this time. And of course, this then puts more pressure on the services that support emergency remote teaching, because then in terms of student wellness, one needs to make sure that as the university refers students to this service, that the services are able to support students online, telephonically, and also in considering some of our students are in the remote and rural areas. And also we saw family and caring responsibility, it came out high, with a lot of students having responsibilities at home, and also unreliable internet connection was also one of the things that was raised, and lack of quiet space. And of course, that is the reality. If one isn't at home, they might not have their own space to study. They might be sharing space, and one has to work at night when everyone has gone to sleep because one is using the kitchen table or something like that. And of course, this also is reflected below if you will look at the responses that the students had in terms of typically the times they studied. A majority was only able to study during the night or in the afternoon, but you can see at the morning, which is normally morning and afternoon is what they use. A good number of students might not be able to use that time anymore because of the conditions at home and sharing spaces and all of those things. And of course, we see a good number of other challenges, but we can see the top one was your mental health caring responsibilities. And of course, this is not unique to UCT. This has been the trend in South Africa and also internationally, with students facing similar challenges. And of course, this is important for us as LIS education and training as we plan forward, and we actually as we find our way forward and navigate this space. And another question that I would like to draw your attention on is engagement and support. So of course, courses have been moved online, and some courses were started physical, and of course they moved online from April. And so, of course, students that started together, and when the courses moved online, so that was like term 2, they actually did feel that they were more connected. However, when one asked the same question in July with the second semester, and when we had courses that were starting in term 3, where the classes or the students had not met the teacher, they have not met their peers, a good number of the students actually they did not feel like they were connected to others in their class during this remote learning. And you can see, and of course, also for our faculty humanities, you can see a good number of students, they actually strongly disagree that they do not feel connected at all in terms of the emergency remote teaching and learning. And also we can see in terms of being able to engage productively online, a lot of students where more than 50% actually did not feel like they were able to engage productively online. And of course, we understand this is because this is new, but also even our students like facilitating, even with the teachers, it's a new space, and trying to facilitate productive engagement online is pretty fairly new. And also we can see some positivity on this side where the students were asked if they were able to access academic support from the courses or the lecturers and tutors. We can see a good number of the students, majority actually, they felt like they actually did get the support that they needed. And of course, that also had then the consequences on those that are providing that support. So on the class conveners, the lecturers and the tutors, which I will touch on as we proceed. So of course, it was positive that a good number of the students felt like they were supported and by their course conveners and tutors and all of that. But also we see with the actual realities of staff and students on the call face of teaching and learning activities during this time, a lot of staff have been experiencing staff burnout because with the emergency remote teaching, it necessitated longer working hours and added pressure to ensure that the success of the academic and also research projects. So trying to move the courses online and trying to make sure that one communicates as clear as possible and using various platforms to ensure that the students are aware of what is happening. So that has resulted in staff burnout. And of course, this also came at the expense. We tried moving the classes online, but also then it meant that one is focusing more on the teaching at the expense of research. And of course, this has consequences long term for our discipline. not only in South Africa and in the continent, but also internationally, as this has been the trend also. And also there has been excessive demands on tutors, especially for the classes that are bigger. If one has classes in the hundreds and thousands, as of course a convener or a lecturer could not be able to respond to everything and had to put the classes into different groups, and tutors doing quite a lot more than they would be doing in a face-to-face environment. And also we've seen an increased dropout rates in terms of students not being able to manage with the courses, or reducing the number of courses, or not being able to manage with the courses at all during COVID-19 period. And of course, we know this is related to the pandemic and some of the social issues that have been at the forefront during this time, such as your gender-based violence. And of course, another one is actually the increased financial burden on institutions, on faculties. And of course, this was as a result of students now not being in residences, not being on campus. So the reality of it, it's one could provide laptops to the students and provide data, but there's also other needs that are not taken care of, as such as hunger. I mean, we've seen a lot of students actually not being able to meet their needs, and also space. And of course, this then I mean, we've been fortunate that our faculty had a fund that was able to support students that had other needs that were not taken care by the university broadly. So students could apply to this fund so that they actually could meet whatever needs they had. Because we see if a parent loses a job, and we've seen a lot of people being retrenched, that of course then it means the student, if one is on a financial aid or a bursary, has to stretch the bursary to buy other things that would probably not be the case if a parent had not been retrenched. And also there we've seen an increased need for support structures. So of course, one key one was when we moved to the emergency remote teaching, was the need that a lot of academics, they needed support in terms of how do I redesign my course. And of course, we've been fortunate that we had the Center for Innovation Learning Innovation for Learning and Teaching, SILT at UCT, which was at the forefront in supporting and equipping and actually upskilling staff. But also we've seen other services like the libraries have the need has really increased from that support, as everything is done virtually. And also disability services and student wellness, which also touches then on the mental health. So of course, there has been an increased need in terms of our student wellness services, in terms of supporting students as well as also staff. Then it's important that I mean, I've presented some of the opportunities that we have and the benefits that that the pandemic has provided us, but and also some of the challenges that we have as LIS education and training. And I think now it's important to consider. We've reflected on the different experiences that our students also experienced during this time, and also then I think I would like to provide some thoughts as we move forward, and how and what would that mean for our LIS education in South Africa, and of course broadly. So I think as we know, there are talks that the virus might be around in 2021, and there's talks of blended learning. And of course, we are aware of the challenges that we've experienced in terms of emergency remote teaching during this time. And I think it's important that whatever decisions or whatever plans that we put in or we put forward, and whatever framework that we arrive with in terms of our teaching and learning moving forward, it is important that we recognize our local environment, our context, and be sensitive to our context, not only in South Africa. I mean, we've seen similar challenges in the African continent and the global South. But I think also we also given the current state with the pandemic and national restrictions, we need to proactively find more ways, not fewer, to promote positive face-to-face social engagements. in the learning environments of our post-apartheid landscape. And this is important for South Africa, and I think also looking at our at our background as a country, but also I don't think it's unique to South Africa. And we need to be able to recognize our new realities that have been brought by the pandemic. There's an increased anxiety, loss, grief, and learning difficulties, and also trauma after lockdown. Of course, this needs to be acknowledged, and they need to foreground our plans moving forward. But also, when as we moved our courses online in terms of the emergency remote teaching, we also are aware that online learning, it reinforces English language as a medium of instruction, and of course it will set us back in the multilingualism project. And of course we understand that using English, it actually further reinforces the dominant Western culture. But another one which I've touched on, which I will not dwell much, it's teacher training. So being able to ensure that as we move online, or as we consider blended learning moving forward, that the skill sets that we are actually digitally affluent for the teachers, that it's not. So we've seen that currently there's been an uneven set of skills across the teachers. So we need to find a way that we can actually ensure that the experiences of our students are not different from one course or one institution to the other, but there is actually teachers are equipped to deliver in this space. But also there has been, in terms I've mentioned support services, and of course this is also going to be a critical area that would need to focus on moving forward, that our support services are ready and they can actually support students remotely, whether by telephone. And of course, we know there's also challenges of not having electricity or network for some of our students. So how do we do that? And of course, I mean, with one of the services that we've been fortunate to have again at UCT is the fact that besides the laptops and providing data, there was also an option to for students to get out printed materials, and they could actually get couriers to get them to the students. But also as we look forward in terms of access, we need to ensure equitable access for our students. And of course, that speaks also to research in terms of, we've seen that subscriptions, libraries cannot subscribe to everything. So also encouraging open access, open scholarship, and also looking at universal design for learning. So our learning environments need to be flexible, they need to be inclusive, and also they need to be student-centered. And I don't think we could ever raise enough the need for spaces. And of course, libraries, they were the common spaces on campus, which were vital for our students. And of course, looking forward, how do we then find or repurpose these spaces to support our students? So as we understand, I mean, there's a greater need for a safe and also a conducive space for our students. And I mean, while we have a lot of unknowns and uncertainties about the future and what it holds for LIS education and training and this COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, as we navigate our way, I think it's important that that we don't our current practices do not actually exacerbate existing inequalities. I think have kind of shown that we have a lot. We live in an environment that we have unequal socioeconomic conditions. So whatever plans and whatever way we think it's best moving forward, we would want to not increase the existing inequalities that we see in our society. And also, so we actually want to equity. I've mentioned equity, inclusiveness, and that is what we should be striving for. And also, we need to see ERT as a short-term approach to meeting pandemic conditions rather than a naturalization of a shift. But of course, we could certainly learn from this experiment and also from the experiences that we had. And of course, we need to recognize innovation, technology, and good solutions. That's because something is innovative or it uses the best technology, that does not necessarily mean that it is a good solution. So we need to be cognizant of our environment and also be sensitive to our context. And of course, just in closing, we understand that for the most vulnerable students, education is life-saving. And of course, not only does it provide safety, protection, but it also instills hope for a brighter future. That is all from me. Thank you so much, colleagues. Over to you, Leanne.
Thank you so much, Andiswa, for that wonderful presentation. Yes, you've definitely given us a lot to think about, and I totally agree with the points that you've made. I know that, you know, this whole COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown has really changed our whole mindset and the way in which we do our work and how we deal with our students. Issues such as the inequalities, the digital divide have really been exacerbated by this whole pandemic, and it's changed the way in which we do our work. And going forward, I think it's going to continue to be like that. There's going to be a more a focus on the online environment and remote learning and teaching. And yes, it's, yeah, you've definitely given us a lot to think about. You will see that there's a poll that's come up on your screen. If you can all just please do this question 1, and then Anna-Marie, our LIASA manager, will give us the results. Yes, once we're done, we can move to our second speaker, who's now online, Dr. Chisita. So, Anna-Marie, can you just give me an idea when the poll is done? Thanks.
Thanks, Leanne. You should see the results now.
Yes, okay, great. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it's basically what I thought, that the whole ICT skills and new technologies would be the most, the biggest kind of opportunity that these times we're living in now have brought us. So yes, I'm going to now move over to Dr. Chisita. I saw just now he was connected. So if he can just, if he can just speak and let us know that he's connected, and then we'll move to his presentation. Dr. Chisita, can you unmute yourself? Hello, yes, I'm handing over to you.
All right, yes. Hello? Hello?
Hello, yes, we can hear you.
All right. Can I go ahead?
Yes, you can go ahead. I've done the introduction at the beginning, so you can just do your presentation.
All right. Are you going to run it for me or?
Yes, I don't have it. You can just click on the share screen option.
All right. Okay, are you seeing it now? Hello?
Yes, your presentation is showing. Can you just put it in presentation mode for us?
All right. Okay, just a minute only. All right, good day, refreshing day to each and everyone. My presentation is on LIS research and the impact of COVID-19. As we know, the year 2020 has seen the whole world engulfed by this global pandemic, which is the COVID-19, 2019, or formerly COVID-19, as some would want to say. This pandemic is rumored to have started in Asia, but there are, counter accusations by the different global powers, each one accusing the other of being the source of the pandemic. So there's been an exchange of tirades and diatribes as counter accusations, become the order of the day. But generally, we cannot ignore the fact that this has been something so momentous. Its impact has been so great to the extent that it has resulted in nearly most countries experiencing the torturous lockdown experiences. Basically, this was just an etymology of COVID, where we say CO is for corona, VI for the virus, D for the disease. And it was formerly referred to as 2019 novel coronavirus, or 2019 nCovid. And on the 11th of March, the WHO director declared the COVID-2019 outbreak a global pandemic. And as a global pandemic, countries that are, affected and those that were not even affected had to take precautionary measures. And libraries, as you know, are social institutions that provide space, physical space, and also virtual space for learners, for researchers, scholars to learn, to exchange ideas, to collaborate. So what we have seen, this has become more of as a challenge to libraries, considering that all along such grandiose disasters hadn't been experienced to that level whereby there's a total shutdown. But basically, when we look at libraries in the 2019 era, COVID-2019 era, we find that they've got a role to promote public health awareness and generating and disseminating COVID information. They also have got a role to support academics, researchers, and clinicians. They also have to provide access to information services via digital platforms and facilitate access to virtual access to digital content. They've also to support online education, and also they have to be on the ground to ensure that learning continues on uninterrupted. When we look at the impact of COVID-2019, we have seen the close of higher education institutions, and IFLA described this as a significant disruption to library services. And in South Africa, this took place after the ministerial pronouncement on the 17th, and on 18th March, there was a total closure of all higher education institutions, including universities and colleges. And we also found that libraries had to find themselves confronted with this challenge. And this challenge required innovation and resourcefulness in order to enable uninterrupted access to higher education. And the impact of COVID-2019 lockdown cannot be underestimated. It has been felt all over throughout the world. And the LIS sector had no option but to activate their virtual systems. And this was also done in order not only to facilitate access to learning materials, but also to play a critical role in ensuring that the nation overcomes the pandemic. But it was not only the pandemic, it was also the infodemic. So the COVID-19 pandemic and infodemic became a challenge and also an opportunity. But I think you understand from historical dialectical materialism that challenges can also become a fertile ground for creativity and innovation. Hence, the continued or uninterrupted or unfettered access through digital library services has become the norm in those resource-endowed academic institutions, colleges, and universities. Further on, we find that the COVID-19 pandemic exposed the dichotomy between libraries that have resources and those that are resource-starved. It also exposed what we can call the lacunae, the gap between those that are technocentric endowed and those that are technocentric starved. The impact of COVID-19 was so momentous on under-resourced institutions and also the socially disadvantaged or marginalized learners who have got no access to modern technology. This means that the digital divide is now something that everyone is aware of, and its impact on higher education is also an experience that we have to deal with, and it was also a challenge that policymakers have to tackle and come up with new strategies on how to turn the digital divide into a digital dividend so that there is democratic access, there is wider access to content for all, irrespective of their social status or class or whatsoever. The COVID-19 pandemic, as we know, it has created what we can call a vacuous space that those technocentric endowed libraries or institutions have been able to fill through the provision of digital library services. And this has become the norm, considering that since the dawn of the digital revolution, there's been a proliferation of a panoply of digital technologies. But this panoply of digital technologies has only been accessible to those institutions that have got the capacity, financial capacity to adapt and acquire these resources to ensure, quality access. And what we have seen also has been the challenges of how to convert from the physical to the virtual spaces, and how to rethink spatial configurations amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And this new spatial configurations is useful in the sense that once the COVID-19 pandemic was pronounced, most institutions had to close. And the only option for providing service was through the virtual library service. So this meant that virtual libraries could reach out to as many people as possible. Right? Now, when we look at digital libraries and their benefits, we find that digital libraries provide remote access, multiple access, seamless access. They also offer what we can call free, WNTF-free versions of documents, and also access to infinite number of resources and selections, and also forms. Hello?
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, right. But however, to look at the other side of these digital libraries, we find that there are problems of technological obsolescence because we need to update the hardware and the software. There's also high cost of internet connectivity, But however, what we have seen in some countries is that internet service is provided by commercial and non-commercial internet service providers. And we have seen that non-commercial internet service providers can also be very useful. These non-commercial internet service providers, or ISPs, come in the form of what we can call National Research and Education Networks, or what we call NRENs. And here in South Africa, we've got SANREN. Each and every country has an NREN or a number of NRENs. And these NRENs have been very useful in supporting education and internet connectivity at an affordable price. Then the other challenge is also how to refresh the content. And sometimes you find that websites are not updated, and you need to refresh the content so that it remains accessible. And also another challenge is the digital rights management issue, copyright issues, and also the issue of what we can call link rots and content rot. Sometimes links that provide you access to whether it's theses, dissertations, it's journal articles or whatever, they might not be active. They need to ensure that they are active, and either the content is moved, and all those technical issues need to be taken into account. There is also the issue of interoperability in terms of systems, especially considering the aspect that libraries are now operating as an ecosystem where they interact with each other, they share resources, they share storage space and other resources. So interoperability is a challenge sometimes in developing countries where maybe funds are not available to purchase the technical hardware to ensure the interoperability of systems, digital library systems. There is also a challenge of network bandwidth, which I think is also connected to the internet service provision. Then there is also the issue of digitization itself and how to preserve the content. And there's also a challenge of how to sustain the digital infrastructure, because it's not a one-off thing, but it's a continuous process where you have to sustain the infrastructure, updating it, among other things. So that presents quite a challenge. Now, when we look at this pandemic, it's not the only one. There have been other pandemics that have taken place from 1430 BC, like the Athenian plague, the Black Death, the Spanish flu from 1918 to 1920. The Spanish flu is more significant because it has been used as a term of reference. This took place after the First World War from 1914 to 1918, which ended on the 11th month, on the 11th day, on the 11th hour of 1918. There's also has been Ebola, Zika, HINI, and all these cases are very useful in linking them to the COVID-19 pandemic, and then we can be able to draw lessons on how libraries and research in libraries has been able to be undertaken, and how access to information was managed during such times of crisis or in emergencies. Right now, when we look at our background of LIS education and research, we find that our LIS education historically began as a practical subject, more of like a TVETized program. When we say TVETized, we are taking it from TVET, which takes technical vocational education and training, but practical or pracademic, practical aspect. However, it has evolved into a discipline taught in higher education as also technology and also other historical developments leading to the development of science. And as a result, it was now a fusion of theory and practice. So it became a pracademical subject in the sense that it has got theory and both practice. Practice in the form of, for example, on-the-job education and training or industrial attachment, where students are sent to learn from the different types of libraries, and then they are assessed whether they have acquired the important, key critical competencies and the proficiencies that will enable them to discharge their duty in a splendid manner. now we also find out that this LIS education is not a static discipline, but it has been evolving just as also its research. And research has contributed more to shaping LIS education and also informing LIS, so that LIS is not just a general subject, but it is also a science among other sciences, because it has adopted the qualities of empiricism in the way how knowledge is generated. For example, we find that empiricism was mainly popularized by Sextus Empiricus, who felt that everything that we say is empirical should be confirmed by all of our five senses, hearing, touching, seeing, and etc. So we find that initially, LIS education is concentrated more on qualitative researches, but now it has evolved into a discipline that caters both for the qualitative and the quantitative, that blends, these paradigms, different research paradigms, in order to generate knowledge. And the amount of research that is done in LIS helps to elevate LIS as a discipline amongst other disciplines. It also helps to position LIS as a discipline that claims to be a science. And it cannot, LIS as a discipline cannot claim to be scientific if it has no scientific content. It cannot claim to be a science, because the science aspect should also be based or anchored on how the knowledge is generated within that discipline. We also find out that LIS has also adopted what we can call cross-discipline or interdisciplinary research. I think you remember back in 2000, Gibbons postulated that the dispensation in which we are moving into would require collaboration, would see disciplines merging and collaborating, because some problems require a holistic approach which borrows from different disciplines in order to understand a phenomenon and also come up with a solution on how to deal with that phenomenon. So our LIS is thriving, despite pundits predicting that the advent of Google would render it useless and would render it into the dustbin of history. We have seen LIS practitioners becoming now champions, facilitators of the adoption of new emerging technologies, including the 5G technologies. Furthermore, we find that the LIS sector has a role to play in order to provide for what we can call the epistemological and ontological needs of users, because there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially when people try to understand this COVID-19 pandemic. For example, there are assertions that it's a punishment from God. Some say it's the New World Order. Some predicted that millions and millions were going to die. Some predicted that this was like an apocalypse, the end of the world. Others said it was the end of democracy. Others said it was the end of history. Some said it was invented in China. Some said it was invented in USA. Tirades, diatribes continue on. But amidst this, the ordinary people continue to suffer from choral hysteria, choral stupidity, the choral information deluge, because we are overwhelmed by an avalanche of information that is coming from all corners because of the proliferation of digital technology. So the LIS sector, as a facilitator for access to information, is also a generator of knowledge, has a role to play in order to organize the disorganized content that is becoming more prevalent on online sites and other sources that people use to access information. And also, they've now become champions in ensuring that people have access to valid, reliable, consistent information that comes from the right sources. And this is achieved through digital literacy, information literacy, because we find that while the rest of the world was under lockdown from March, the only people who were not under lockdown were fake news peddlers. And the fake news peddlers signal the death of the expert, and they, force us to celebrate mediocrity and falsehood at a time when we should be, having access to information that can enable us to live better and to build humanity for the best. So I just had to talk about that role that research can also play within the LIS sector. Now, why do we need this research? We need it because we want to generate new knowledge to add on to the corpus of LIS education, so that it's not static, but it is growing and growing with quality research, both qualitative, quantitative, and a combination of both. We also intended to elevate the status of LIS as a profession among other professions, so that people don't just look at us as some armchair, administrators whose role is just fixated to stamping books or discharging content through computers or so on. We also want to give shape and direction to the profession, so that its trajectory of the LIS profession will be much more brighter, to the extent that we might all need sunglasses to confront this fruitful future. We also need research to weaponize or empower librarians to provide optimal services to users, not to just stick to traditional roles, but to come up with very innovative ways of how they can manage institutions, whether virtually or physically or both. We also need to promote evidence-based decision-making in LIS education. And we also need to build a critical mass of critical thinkers who are able to solve practical problems and whose praxis in the profession is par excellence. We also need research to solve the numerous myriad of problems that confront us as we adjust to the changes or seismic changes within the LIS landscape, the global LIS landscape, which is not a static landscape, but it is in a state of constant flux due to new emerging technologies that we need to think about. So it's only research that can help us to achieve that. We find that one of the most important aspects of international collaboration has been the International Coalition of Library Consortia, whereby they've asked the publishers to temporarily lift certain usage restrictions on COVID-19 content and datasets, thus enabling democratic access, and we applaud them for that. We've seen also waivers, waiving on all simultaneous user limits to an institution's licensed digital content in support of research, discovery, and learning. We've also seen international, consensus calling for promoting remote access and the temporary lifting of existing contractual interlibrary loans, so that these can also continue on, and also allowing the maximum extent of copyright. Here we now need to look at what we call the limitations, exceptions, and fair use. And I understand currently South Africa is, reworking on a new copyright law that might provide for these broaden the limitations and exceptions and fair use in order to facilitate access to information, promote copyright and copyleft for the benefit of scholarship. To wind up on this, what are the strategies for survival? We need continuous professional development and workplace learning, enhanced networking, consider new emerging technologies, collaboration and cooperation, partnership with commercial and both non-commercial ISPs like NRENs, and also So we need to do more research on how we can create a new economy based on independent information practice or praxis, what we call upper mediation and intermediation within the LIS sector. I am going to wind up my note, my presentation on that. Thank you so much. I hope this made sense.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chisita, for that wonderful presentation. You really have given us a lot of information and insight into the whole area of LIS research, and just how this pandemic has impacted on the LIS sector, and given us great opportunities to actually, to do research and to just, look around and see what opportunities are there for us. There are definite challenges, obviously, especially in terms of inequalities and the digital divide, and, but it has really given us something to think about. So thank you very much to you for your presentation, as well as to Andiswa. And I think now we can move to, I don't know if there are any questions or comments in the chat box, but we can move now and open the floor. If you want to ask a question, you can just raise your hand, and then you'll be able to speak. I see the second question for the poll is up. So if you can just answer that. And yes, let's just see what the results of that are before we move to the comments and the questions. Yeah, I see from the results here now, the ICT problems, that seems to be a very common challenge that we all face, as well as just the lack of the face-to-face interaction, which we miss. So that is definitely something, technology is going to have to improve, and so that going forward, we are able to really make the most use of it. Okay, I'm going to open the floor now to questions, comments. I don't know, my colleague Madihi is going to assist with the chat. Sorry, yes, my colleague Madihi is online. She's going to also assist with the chat box she'll monitor if there are any comments. But otherwise, I'm going to open the floor now. Thank you.
Leanne, I just saw one question from Monde Madiba earlier, and I think this question was raised during Andiswa's presentation, so she might want to answer. And Monde said, I'm wondering if it will not be possible to continue with hybrid, I assume, education or presentations of the classes post-COVID-19 era.
Thank you for that question, Anna Mary. And Madiba, I think anything is possible. I think the way COVID-19, we've seen the reality of that in practice, that anything is possible. But I think in terms of thinking about hybrid teaching and learning or blended learning, we could certainly do anything. But as I mentioned, it's important that we do not think that since we've managed to move in an emergency situation to online or remotely, that we can actually decide that we want to now move fully online. Of course, that involves a lot of planning and involves also purposeful design and also designing the learning experiences. So I think with the right planning and also support from campus systems and the technology teams, we could certainly do that. But of course, we probably would need more time and resources to do that instead of, and besides what we had to do in terms of the 2 or 3 months we had to move our courses online. So I certainly think it's possible to do anything with the right resources and planning. We could certainly do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Andiswa. Are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make? You're welcome to raise your hand if you would like to contribute.
Oh, hello.
Yes, hello, Collence, you're welcome to speak.
Oh yeah, I was also going to say that since some of the LIS research, LIS research we conduct is field-based. Now with the lockdowns and the oxymoronic social distance rules or measures, it has become quite a challenge for even students and researchers to go on the field amidst these circumstances. So it's only maybe as a result of the easing up of the restrictions that you find that researchers are now able to go back on the field to conduct research. So it will mean that if we calculate from March up to the present time, a lot of time has been lost, even though it was necessary because of the given circumstances. But a lot of time has been lost as researchers could not go on the field to conduct field research so that they can proceed to continue on to do their analysis. Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Collins. I see that there is a comment in the chat from Sifiwe, who says, I'm wondering as to what extent does current library curriculum prepare librarians for emergency situations like this? I don't know if either of the speakers have got something to add. How well is the current library curriculum prepared for what we are facing now?
Okay, can I chip in?
Yes, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what I noticed from my studies is that the current LIS curriculum has an element whereby it deals with those issues that have to do with the disaster management or disaster preparedness. In traditional curricula, it was known as materials management, and then they could incorporate a component of disaster preparedness. But what I've seen, for example, drawing lessons from America and the other world, libraries, the library curriculum has a component of disaster preparedness, and libraries have been able to play a very critical role during emergencies, where they've been able to assist society, to assist even the national disaster management plan. And they've been also proposal that librarians should have a position or should be accommodated on any board that has to deal with the disasters, because they've got valuable experience that can be very useful in also assisting disaster management. Because, for example, if we look at records management, there's a component of disaster management incorporated within the curriculum, and other curricula, they have it as a separate course where students have to learn how to manage disasters and also how to prepare a disaster preparedness plan that is both applicable in any given circumstances. So we need to sensitize policymakers on the need, on the fact that we should also have a seat on the table of those who are going to manage any disaster of whether apocalyptic nature or whatever magnitude it is. The role of the librarian, the information scientist, whether the records manager, the archivist, or related field, their roles are very indispensable and very critical in ensuring also value addition to disaster management, in any given circumstances. Thanks.
Thank you, Collins. I don't know if you want to add anything, Andiswa.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. I'd like to just add on that. I think that's a good question. I think it's quite important during this time. I believe LIS education, I mean, we have some, the curriculum has evolved over time, and we have some schools in South Africa and also in the continent doing much better than others in how they've infused ICTs and newer technologies in terms of the curriculum and equipping librarians. And of course, this has evolved over time. So of course, librarians are trained 10 years ago would not have gotten this kind of curriculum. But of course, we know in the recent years also with schools actually introducing occasional courses as a way of continuous professional development, and also Collins did touch on CPT as CPD as a way that librarians actually upskilling, because a lot of librarians might have started many years ago, and of course introducing ICTs and technology and also just media and social media and marketing and different things like that is a bit new. But also I think we still battle with the challenge of gaps, and some schools doing greater and better than others, but with some schools still using a curriculum that is actually a bit outdated. And we actually have a number, I think, ahead of departments. I see my Prof. Raju is around, and I'm sure she can probably add something on that from the head of schools.
Leanne, may I come in?
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah, Leanne, yeah, it's Jaya Raju from the University of Cape Town. Yes, thank you, Andiswa. I was actually waiting in the queue to say something. And thank you to both the speakers for the response to, I think, what is a very important question. And apart from the disciplinary content that both Collence and Andiswa are making reference to, I think what is very important in the way we deliver curricula in the LIS schools is that we shouldn't forget about the important area of generic competencies. So when we're dealing with a disaster situation like the one that no one ever anticipates this. So it's difficult to be prepared ahead of time. But what is important is that our graduates should have generic competencies, such as the ability to be flexible, to be adaptable, to have intellectual curiosity to explore, or to work in a team, or the ability to work under pressure. And I think these are the generic competencies that have actually come together in the current environment and have made things possible in higher education as well as in the LIS professional landscape possible, to the extent that we've seen such wonderful creativity in the way services have been, have been rolled out. So generic competencies are very important. When we design curricula, we very often think more in terms of, your disciplinary, your disciplinary content referred to differently in different parts of the world. But also one needs to also bear in mind that the generic competencies, the kind of silent competencies, which don't appear there in a form of an outline, but with the way we teach and the way we assess, those should be imbibed into our graduates, so that when they do go out into the workplace, they are able to cope with the kinds of situations we are dealing with in the current pandemic situation. Thank you for the opportunity for that input.
Thank you so much, Professor Raju, for giving your insights into this. Yes, it's definitely things that we need to think about. Are there any other comments or questions from speakers? Or from the, sorry, from the floor, from the participants?
Yes, yeah, morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for the inspiring presentations that you just shared with us. Yes, Liam, there is a question from Andrew Memela, and it reads as thus: in disaster preparedness, we have only been mostly looking at floods and fire in South Africa. I think we need to start looking at wars, pandemics, etc. I wonder what you think on that. I think any of you, Prof. Chisita or Andiswa, I think we can respond to this one. Thank you.
Oh, can I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Professor Raju was highlighting there on those generic skills, and also what Andiswa highlighted on the fact that we need to undertake continuous professional development, because if we don't do so, we risk suffering from what we can call intellectual and professional rusticity, which might also be a very serious setback on how we discharge our services. And the aspect of disaster preparedness, yes, we traditionally, the focus has been on how to deal with such things like floods, which are still happening up to now because of climate change, fires, etc. But we also need to look at also other disasters that have to do with the digital environment in which we are operating, where systems can crash and etc. Other cyber threats that can also be a challenge. So I agree with Andrew that we need to gear up and incorporate new forms of disaster preparedness that takes into consideration the threats that are also arising from emerging technologies. For example, as we move towards 5G technologies, 5G is good because it is driven by the 5A paradigm: anyhow, anywhere, anytime, anyone, where we have got virtual access to information and convergence of technologies. But there are also challenges that arise from 5G, the disadvantages of 5G. For example, in this context of radio, radiation and etc., which might result in cancers and other serious problems. So those disasters, we need to start preparing them now for a better future. So I agree with what Andrew is saying, that apart from the traditional ones, where we know they still continue, but we also need to look into the future and looking into the crystal ball, the cyber world in which we are, where we have cloud storage and etc. It's appears to be a risky landscape that has also its benefits and also its challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Collence. Andiswa, would you like to add something to that?
No, I think he touched on everything. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. There is another question from Margaret Atsango, and it reads as thus: how have you as academic staff been able to support your students who have been affected by the pandemic? And I think this question goes to all the academic staff members basically who tuned in today. So any of you who would like to have a take on this can please do so. Thank you.
Can I just start on that? I think, as I mentioned, I think being compassionate and also being sensitive to students' situations and conditions that of course have been different during the pandemic, but also I think, I mean, we've kind of, with our learning management system at UCT, we've got actually stats that can track if students are accessing the resources that have been put up. And of course, if one sees that students are not, probably there is something. And then of course, telephonically contacting them and understanding, and also just providing that in terms of deadlines, being open to situations that students might be experiencing, and also referral to the student wellness services, counseling and support services, and other financial resources that the students could use to actually manage with the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Andiswa. Colleagues, any of you who'd like to have a go at this is more than welcome.
Well, I just as what Andiswa is saying, I think we need to be sensitive also, considering that our students come from different backgrounds, and the majority of them don't even have access to internet connectivity, and we should not have rules that are inflexible to the extent that they won't be able to accomplish their objective to realize their full potential within the LIS field. So I think Andisa has touched on a holistic approach, which also encompasses psychological solutions, social and psychological solutions to assist students so that they can realize their full potential. So we need some element of Ubuntu infused within our how we do whatever we do, so that we take into account also the challenges that students, not only students, even ourselves as staff, sometimes we also are affected by those same atmospherics.
Thank you, Collence. Colleagues, there is a message from LIASA, and I think all of you can see that. Any other questions, colleagues?
Leanne, may I just make a comment in response to the last set of comments?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Leanne. Leanne, the comment I'd like to make is that for me, one of the biggest signals from a pedagogical point of view, coming out of the pandemic, was that it has exposed in such a stark way the fault lines of our societies, particularly the structural inequalities. Andiswa spoke at great length about ERT, and I remember when I commented to one of my colleagues abroad that in South Africa we refuse to call it remote teaching, but emergency remote teaching, because we have to be so cognizant of the inequalities that have come to the fore. I mean, the inequalities have always been there, but I think the pandemic has brought to our attention that we need to actually take in our pedagogy, in our planning, in our future teaching, in the way we plan in 2021, we need to actually take into account those important social issues that have always been on our agenda, and perhaps we haven't given enough attention to it. Issues like, decolonization, social bias, systemic and institutional racism, issues of class, and how we've treated people differently from different backgrounds. And, there is no one size fits all in the way we deliver our education, and that we need to be sensitive to the different backgrounds that our students come from. And even some of us in academic departments, amongst us as educators ourselves, if we look at the higher education situation in South Africa, an institution like UCT was able to roll out, because of its resources, it was able to roll out emergency remote teaching quite quickly. but we have other institutions, and that came out very clearly in the media, that they were not able to do that. So my closing remark is, I think the pandemic has shown us the sensitivity, the compassion we need to actually engage in our pedagogical planning and in the way we deliver teaching and learning, and for that matter, in the way we conduct research going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Raju. Yeah, I agree. It's the inequalities and the whole issue of people coming from different backgrounds has really come to the fore during this time, and it's something we always have to bear in mind. I just want to go to, there's another comment in the chat box from Segarani, who says, I do think that the have-nots have really been struggling to continue with their studies during this pandemic. However, first world countries experience the same kind of challenges. And yes, that is definitely true. I don't know if either of the speakers have got something to add there. I see Andiswa says no. Collence, anything to add?
Globally, when we look at issues to do with access to information, we must also consider the fact that we cannot compare ourselves, especially speaking of Africa as a continent. Our digital infrastructural systems, the extent to which they have evolved, and etc., and compare them maybe to first world countries. So for us, speaking from the perspective of developing countries, there's some challenges that have to do with ensuring democratic access to information, and also digital inclusion for all, irrespective of status, race, whatever it is, so that our society, everyone has access to digital technologies, and everyone has access to information that can also be able to help them to contribute to digital development, to governance and other social, political, economic issues, to actively contribute through the use of technology. So we still have that challenge. But however, as I have seen, like throughout Africa, I've seen that the UbuntuNet Connect has been working very hard to support national research and education networks throughout Africa, because the UbuntuNet Connect is also connected to other continental internet service providers, for example, in Europe, Asia, and etc. Like Asia is ASREN and etc. So it has been trying to help each and every country, so that amongst the members of the AU, all countries have got an NREN or more NRENs that can also support institutions, especially higher education institutions, to have access to affordable internet connectivity. And they also assist in the development and sprucing up of research infrastructure to ensure that education remains of high quality and of key priority as the only tool that can leverage us or catapult us from the vagaries of poverty and etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raju, and to you, Professor Chisita. I think the reality of Africa is that we'll honestly never compare we'll never actually catch up, to be quite honest. We'll forever have north and those who can manage. There will always be a digital divide, there will always be information divide. So for that, we'll forever have hybrid systems. Thank you so much for the two comments. Colleagues, we have a comment from Margaret, who actually compares with what Andiswa was saying in terms of issues of compassion and sensitivity, which are very key and important during this time. And also, this also touches on issues of Ubuntu, which was alluded to by Dr. Chisita. We have another question from Siviwe, if you don't mind, Leanne, that I take this one as well. And Siviwe is asking, in libraries, we are pleasantly surprised to realize that more people attend our online sessions than in person. Have the academic experience the same with their online classes? Thank you. Over to the two speakers, or to anyone who's in the academic space, basically.
Thank you for that question. I think, so for my classes, personally, I have not experienced that. And I think across with colleagues, that has been the case. We've actually seen less attendance. I think students got so used too quickly with asynchronous. So they would like to have videos, they'd like to see the recording after, instead of getting ready for the so-called online class or a meeting. So you'd normally see your good students attending all the time, but probably if you get 30% of the class, you're very lucky. So yes, no, Severe, we did not experience the same. A lot of actually, I think that is the reason why we're actually doing hybrid now. So we have our students back for what we refer to also as a practical block at UCT, because we realize that not everything can be done online and our classes are small enough. So we meet the health and safety conditions in terms of the virus to actually have some of the staff we're actually doing it face-to-face, while some we still keep them to remotely. Thank you.
Thanks, Andiswa. Collins, anything to add on that?
No, I think Andiswa has said it well.
Okay. Yes, I think we've now come to the end of our time. So I'm going to close. I don't think there are any other questions or comments, but I just wanted to thank especially our two speakers, Andiswa and Collins. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentations and just for availing yourself for today and sharing your knowledge and your insights on this topic with us. It's really been a really worthwhile webinar, and I'm sure everybody has learned a lot. And then just to say thank you to all the attendees. Thank you for being here, for supporting us, for supporting RETIG, and I'm sure we will have lots of similar types of webinars in the going forward in the future, because it really is in these times especially, it's an ideal way in which we can network with each other and exchange ideas. And lastly, but not least, I just want to say a big thank you to Anna-Marie, our LIASA manager. Thank you for doing all the technical and admin type of tasks surrounding the webinar, and yes, just for your support always. And I think that's about all. Just to say to everybody, keep safe, stay well, enjoy your weekend, and yeah, you're welcome to contact me or either of the speakers if you've got any further questions related to this webinar. Yeah, I think we can close off now and say goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Papa.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.